The conversation about the gut is still relatively new.
The everyday toxins that we come across, it cannot break down properly. When you drink alcohol, it causes a weakening of the lining of the gut.
I was never taught to like rebuild my gut back up, and I was never told to not drink.
The realization that you get so much more out of life without it in your world.
Yeah.
And that it's pulling you back and it's actually stopping you from being able to feel whole.
I've woken up and I get so much more joy out of everything than I did before. Welcome back to The Upward Spiral, the podcast where we explore the transformative power of intentional living, starting with rethinking our relationship with alcohol. I'm your host, Michelle O'Brien, and in this episode, we are embarking on a journey to understand how alcohol impacts women's bodies through different life stages. So whether you're in your 20s navigating social pressures, considering starting a family, or entering your transformative years of menopause, this episode is packed with insights to empower you to make informed choices about your well-being. I'm your guide on this journey because a couple of years ago, I decided to reevaluate my own relationship with alcohol. And honestly, I think I've used the word transformative about 3 times now, but it really was a transformative experience and it led to greater health, joy, and purpose in my life. And that's what I want for you too. So now let me introduce you to our incredible guest. She is a functional medicine health coach, a certified personal trainer, and an NLP practitioner. She's helped countless women optimize their hormones, their gut health, and overall well-being. So with her infectious energy, impressive achievements, please can I welcome the amazing Jo Brownlow.
Thank you. Very nice introduction.
Welcome to The Upward Spiral. I am so excited that you're here today.
I'm excited to talk about this topic today.
Yeah, it's so great.
It's very important.
It is. And there's so many topics I actually want to talk to you about. And I'm hoping that we could do another episode on alcohol and gut health later.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's something that I've been on my own journey with my whole life.
Yeah.
But today, let's talk about the impact alcohol has on women at different life stages. Before we get into it, just want to introduce yourself a little bit. Tell us a little bit about your story.
Well, my story with alcohol is it's been 6 years since it's coming up for 6 years at the end of this month since I last drank any alcohol. I was brought up in a family where alcohol was the let's celebrate, let's commiserate. It was a daily occurrence in my family.
Yeah.
And so you then learn that is how life should be with alcohol. So I just, went with the flow, and I never really had a very healthy lifestyle until when my son was 6 years old and he had a lot of neurological challenges, and we had to go on a sort of a gut healing journey for him. And that whole process made me understand how important nutrition and lifestyle is on your overall health as well as neurological health. That process, I then got diagnosed with Hashimoto's, which is an autoimmune disease, which basically is where your own immune system attacks your thyroid gland, which is basically the gland that produces your hormone that sets the metabolism of every cell in your body. So for me, life very much was slowing down. I had a very low pulse rate. And interestingly, rather than going with the low energy, I went into that full-on exercise mode, thinking that's healthy.
Yeah.
So learning through functional medicine that actually what I was doing was basically like a self-soothing mechanism was very interesting. And over the period of working with my son, I studied to become a health coach, and I realized that my relationship with alcohol was I'd be all puritanical all week. All week I'd be sort of not eating, I'd be working out, I'd be eating healthy food, and I'd get to a Friday night and I would knock back a bottle of wine, maybe even a bottle and a half, and then feel terrible for the rest of the weekend. And it was this cycle that I went through every single week. And I reached that point where and there were several episodes where, the kids are at that age where they're very much conscious of what mummy and daddy are doing. And the last time I ever drank was on a night where it was a Halloween party, and I basically crawled up the stairs afterwards, and the kids were there. And it was not a proud moment. And at that point I was like, okay, I'm going to not drink until I was going to run a half marathon. So I thought I'm not going to drink for 6 weeks. And then I read a book, This Naked Mind. I don't know, have you ever read that? By Annie Grace. And just reading that just made me realize emotionally, I didn't need alcohol. And it's just, I've gone from strength to strength since then. I've really felt that I've found my purpose. Finding functional medicine and helping people is enough, of a drug. Weirdly, I get so much joy out of that. And actually, I don't feel any need or desire to drink again, which is great.
I love that. And I'm just like nodding along with everything that you're saying, because it's very similar.
Yeah.
It's a very similar story to me. Like I've always cared about my health, exercise a lot, eating healthy, practice spiritually, read, always looking for kind of self-improvement, but then would drink, and then wonder why I wasn't quite, getting to where I wanted to be in all aspects of my life, whether that was kind of patience with my kids or work or my training or body composition goals or, healing my gut, whatever it was,
It gives you, I feel it gives you sort of a low-lying slight depression.
Yeah.
There's the joy gets sapped because you're not in touch with your emotions enough, because the whole process of drinking is that numbing process.
Yeah.
So, I just feel so alive now, and I feel,
I love how you said that. I feel so alive, because I'm exactly the same. I feel like I've woken up and I get so much more joy out of everything than I did before. And I'm able to do more. It's been amazing. And this is why I started this podcast, because I was just like, it wasn't to preach sobriety. I'm not going to kind of force that on anybody. And I'm not coming at this from a place of addiction. I was very much kind of what we call a grey zone drinker. But what it's done to my life and how much it's transformed my life and how much happier I am, I can't stay quiet on it.
Yeah,
I really want to share that with people.
Yeah, I agree. Absolutely.
So let's go back to the topic at hand.
Down to the topic in hand. Okay.
We've only got the entire lifespan of a woman to cover today. First of all, let's start with the early years. So alcohol and young adult bodies.
Interestingly, I would say kids nowadays aren't probably drinking as early as we used to. I know I started drinking much earlier, the odd glass of cider at 13, 14 years old. As we were discussing just before we started, the young brain does not develop until you're sort of in your early 20s. So if you're adding alcohol into a brain that has not developed fully, you're basically causing some neurological changes, which, especially if it's a repeated process, this is not going to be good for the brain development ability. It's not just about learning, but it's also about emotional regulation, because it taps into those areas of the brain where it can exacerbate anxiety and depression. And I would say with a teenager, the perfect thing about teenagers they're probably a lot healthier and stronger. They can detox. Their guts are probably a bit stronger. They haven't had years and years of abuse as such. So it doesn't go on a systemic level as deeply, but on an emotional level, it is incredibly impactful. And I feel that the later that you can introduce alcohol to children, the better. I think some adults will go, oh, we'll just give them a glass of wine just to allow them. But I think that then gives them the impression that they can be like mum and dad, who are probably going out a lot at the weekends and binge drinking. Neurologically, it affects, compulsive behaviors, anxiety, depression. And then we combine that with the sort of the addiction to needing to numb to a certain degree, but then that numbing behavior of social media, it then is that combined dopamine need, desire that people have is it's all about, we might have to cut this, I've got to try and explain it in a clear way. Kids' minds are very predisposed, geared towards dopamine, with the fact that they live on their devices nowadays. And alcohol is a really lovely quick shot of dopamine.
Yeah.
And that then leads to maybe that reliance, which, of course they can't get hold of it that regularly, but if they see that that is something that they need to be having, it's setting them up, badly for later on in life.
I've just had like a penny drop moment when you were talking, and I don't think as part of my healing process since entering sobriety, I don't think I ever went as far back as kind of being 16, but I was diagnosed with clinical adolescent depression at 16 after a suicide attempt.
Oh my gosh.
Now, this is not something I've spoken about on the podcast yet, and I'll kind of save it for another time. But, it was around the time that I was starting to go out a lot more. We left school at 16 in my kind of part of England, and then we went to sixth form college, which was separate from the school. So you kind of have, 5 or 6 schools kind of come together for this sixth form college, and it's different. It's much more grown up. You're going out on the weekends. You're going to bars and clubs, and you're starting to drink. And I really struggled, really, really struggled to kind of find my place within a new community. Overly tried way too much to fit in, really.
And drinking is that way to fit in. You
huge part
lose your bravado. You get more bravado because you
and because that was what we did, right? That was what we did a couple of times a week. We'd all kind of go to the pub. That's how we connected. That's how we bonded. That's how we spent time together.
And if you weren't drinking, you would be the odd one out, and you wouldn't be included in that. So it is a really tough thing.
And obviously with that comes excess, because you don't know at that age how much is too much for you and your body. And I'm actually really tiny. You can't always tell on camera, but I'm only kind of 5'2", and trying to keep up with everybody else, I would often be the one that was kind of carried home or put in a taxi home because I was always kind of being sick in the toilet. Sorry, coming back to the mind though.
Yes.
Is I don't think I've ever really thought on, was alcohol actually contributing to the depression? Was it contributing to the anxiety? Was it, and almost definitely.
Absolutely.
100%. I might not have been having the same hangovers back then.
Yeah. Our bodies can detox much better.
Yeah.
And also back then, we didn't have those social media outlets, which I'm not saying it's a positive thing, and that's maybe why less kids nowadays do turn to alcohol because, having children of that age, that experimental age, neither of my boys are interested in alcohol, but they do have the social media outlet to get their little dopamine hits from.
Yeah.
So it's all about, and so as a group in their friendship groups, there are very few kids in their friendship groups that are interested in alcohol. There are a few.
Yeah.
I'd say girls are actually the ones that are drinking more nowadays in the teens.
I would say it being someone who looks younger for my age as well, and you can imagine back then I wanted to drink to appear older, to seem more grown up. So that was also a big part of it as well, to be able to kind of go out and be treated like an adult, to be able to drink and have adult experiences. So that might be one of the reasons why girls are drinking more than boys, maybe.
Yeah, I think it is that.
Yeah. So what else is happening, particularly kind of with women during this time around hormones?
Yeah. Okay. So the interesting thing is alcohol, is actually quite high in sugar, and it's not just the alcohol, but actually just teens and sugar don't mix very well when it comes to hormones. So when you have either some high stress in your life or quite a lot of sugar in your life, that can lead to skewing of your sex hormones quite badly. So what happens is when you have a lot of sugar or a lot of stress, which causes high blood sugar, that and stress and anxiety is quite prevalent in the puberty. The blood sugar asks for the release of insulin, which basically is the hormone that manages your blood sugar to make sure that it's put into the right place. So that then rises and rises when you have lots more sugar in your diet, and that then basically causes higher testosterone levels, and that can cause something, different hormone imbalances. The main hormone imbalance is called estrogen dominance, which is where there's lots of estrogen in the body, which isn't being detoxed so well. And it then causes PCOS, polycystic ovarian syndrome, endometriosis, and fibroids. So those are things. And I would say that that's something that would happen probably in the late teens, early 20s is sort of more prevalent. But if you start out getting your periods, periods are starting to happen earlier just due to the food chain, the fact that all our food has got much more antibiotics and hormones in. So that's basically affecting people's microbiome, and the antibiotics are suppressing the good bacteria, but also the hormones in our food chain in, plastic containers with hot food and soy products and, all these different vegan food options, which are quite a few are based on soy. They're very phytoestrogenic. So this, alcohol will be one of the factors, but essentially it's the blood sugar skewed, and then that causes estrogen dominance, which then causes problems with fertility. Yeah. And that's something that you want to address before you get into those fertile years when you get married, because that is not a nice journey to go on. Because I myself had to do IVF, but it was not related to my fertility, but it's not a fun process to go through. No. And to leave, there is a trend to leave having babies much later, isn't there?
Yeah.
Everybody wants to have their careers first and then do the children, but actually it's the hormonal imbalances are going to be exacerbating challenges with fertility when you want to have children.
Okay, so if you are a parent listening to this of teenage girls, good news is overall we're seeing younger people drink less, so that's positive. What other advice could you give?
Well, watch out for the trigger signs. If your daughter is experiencing like very heavy periods, lots of sort of sore discomfort, quite angry, aggressive around their periods, even skipping periods, which that can sort of be a sign of not ovulating. Acne, actually, sort of teen acne is a big sort of sign of either estrogen or testosterone dominance. So you want to make sure that those signs, if you see them, not to do the first job of going to see the dermatologist and getting drugs, because the drug will not be handling the root cause. Now, the root cause is a hormonal imbalance. When they give you a drug, it will either be an antibiotic, which will also affect their gut bacteria, or it will be something called Accutane, which reduces the fats in the body. So it's basically sort of drying out all your skin pores. The problem with that is it also dries out your cellular, the cell membranes. So it can actually lead to quite long-term, not positive effects, because when cell membranes dry out, they go hard and they're not porous and can't allow for good cellular function. Yeah. So working on the root cause, saying, okay, so why is this happening? Could it be something related to the gut health, which has been skewed by maybe too much alcohol or not enough good quality food? Could it be blood sugar imbalance? Let's work on changing the diet a little bit, trying not to have as many processed sugary-based foods, lots more fiber, making sure they're having proper food, 3 meals a day, a proper protein-filled breakfast rather than a bowl of cereal, because that will then lead to better hormonal balance and also better skin. And I think the skin is that sort of obvious sign, and it can also be a motivation for the teen to try and clean up their health, rather than saying, "Oh, I'll just take you to a dermatologist."
And then we could look at talking to your child about drinking a little bit later. So, if you want to introduce alcohol, maybe look to do that a little bit later because of the brain development.
Yes, absolutely. So, going back to that, I think it's also maybe even speaking to the mums of the friends that your daughter's hanging out with, to say, could we try and have a rule where, we're not encouraging alcohol?
Yeah.
Because I think that if their friends are not being encouraged, then they'll probably go along with it as well. And that will help.
Oh, for sure. And I think that's it. Like I've said this on the podcast before, my parents love to drink, and our house was very much the house where we could all get a drink, if we wanted to drink. And I think my mum and dad always had that mentality of, oh, well, I'd rather you do it in the house where we can have eyes on you than be doing it in the park down the road where we don't know what could happen.
Yeah.
So, they always kind of had some alcohol pops and some light beers in the fridge, and that, friends came round, they'd kind of pass us one. But, again, I don't know if that's necessary.
No. I mean, I think it's hard because, I'm not against it. I haven't been asked about it, but I would say trying to be less offering would probably be the offer less.
I think it just totally depends, doesn't it, on the friendship group and the friendship group's parents.
Yes. And if you can be open to the fake friendship group's parents, which is harder as they get into the teens. You don't hear from the parents. It just doesn't happen.
Yeah.
Mm.
Oh, okay.
Yes.
So we've gone from the early years.
Yes.
So let's go on to kind of fertility, pregnancy, and beyond.
Yeah.
What is happening to women's bodies during this time, and how could alcohol impact that?
Well, the alcohol on a systemic level impacts. The key area that it actually impacts is your ability to detox in the liver, which I think everybody knows.
Yeah.
The liver will be affected, but also the gut microbiome. And there is a downstream from drinking a lot of alcohol. It's very acidic. It basically can really affect the good gut bacteria, but it also can affect the ability for the gut to keep its, as in to prevent leakiness in the gut. It can exacerbate leaky gut. Now, to explain what leaky gut is, we have our gut is made to be semi-permeable. It is sort of an exchange corridor so that it stops any toxins from reaching into your systemic body, because your gut is actually outside of your systemic body, because your mouth is open and it enters. So what happens is when you drink alcohol, it causes a weakening of the lining of the gut. Now, this lining is meant to be allowing the good stuff in, like the nutrients, but when it's weakened and opened more, we have undigested food particles going into our bloodstream, and the same with toxins that maybe won't have been broken down properly because the microbiome isn't working as well as it should be if you're having alcohol on a regular basis. These toxins go in, the immune system within your body then goes into alert mode, and it causes something called inflammation, which can lead to anything from just, achiness in the joints to autoimmune illnesses like, Hashimoto's that I have. There are lots of other causes for leaky gut, but alcohol on a continuous basis is a definite massive trigger. And also affecting the good bacteria in our gut, because we want to have bacteria to do the jobs, which is basically assimilating nutrients and allowing for it. Some of the bacteria produce vitamins for you. So we have to work symbiotically with it. And when they go, then they can't do their jobs. So it is quite hard to absorb nutrients properly. It will affect your ability to digest as well. And now digestion is a really key part in your ability to take nutrients from food. I would say, kids when they're younger, it will affect their guts, but not really affect their livers because their livers are nice and strong.
Yeah.
But when we get into our sort of the 20-something, 30s, we really want to be making sure that we're not depleting the gut microbiome and opening up the gut lining, because that causing inflammation, then the body's on high alert, and then it's not saying, I want to be in my lovely parasympathetic rest and digest state and create babies. It's thinking, I'm in a protective mode. I don't want to create children in this way. So we've still got, the fact that the hormones will have changed because of you've got more estrogen dominance. So that's also a factor. But now we're sort of adding on another layer of our body's not doing the same job in digesting the food properly. And now our liver is working much harder, because when you drink alcohol, the first job the liver does is to detoxify what you're drinking. It has to basically remove the toxins and do a job on that. So the other jobs that it needs to do, which is, the everyday toxins that we come across, it cannot break down properly. So it's like slowing down the process of being able to detoxify, which means that we then have increased inflammation as well.
There's lots to unpack in here. So we'll save a lot of the gut conversation for another episode, because I really want to get into that, because I was diagnosed with leaky gut about 9 years ago. And it's so funny. I think the one kind of key insight that comes out from all of this is that the conversation about the gut is still relatively new.
Yes.
Not once during, I had two serious times where I was hospitalized in my 20s, and I was given extreme antibiotics, one for food poisoning and one for meningitis, and it absolutely was stripped my gut bare. I was never given probiotics. I was never taught to like rebuild my gut back up, and I was never told to not drink, and I was never told the impact. So as soon as I'd recovered from both of those incidents, I just went back into my normal life of like drinking heavily, and suffered from horrific gut issues, and then eventually leading to leaky gut. Then it's taken a long time for me to build that back up. But, throughout the entire treatment process, not once did say alcohol is going to be making this worse. I think when I moved to Singapore, we used to do these champagne brunches.
Oh gosh,
on a Sunday.
I remember those.
And for anyone who's not in Singapore, it's basically you go to one of the beautiful hotels, you get dressed up on a Sunday at 12 o'clock, and you go and have brunch. But it's like the most unbelievable buffet you could ever imagine.
Yeah, and it's free flow.
And it's free flow. It's free flow champagne normally, and then you can get cocktails and everything else. But the food is incredible, but the drink, and when we first moved here, it was, let's get our money's worth.
Yes,
because
absolutely.
it's expensive.
Oh,
so, but I would suffer for days afterwards with my gut. And because maybe I was being really healthy during the week, not eating too much sugar, I would go to these brunches, I would indulge in all of the desserts, and I would probably drink 2 bottles of champagne, and the sugar, I would feel like someone was wringing out my gut for days afterwards. Until the point where I was like, I have to go. I can't do this anymore. But so coming back to, we've talked about the liver, and we've talked about the gut.
Yeah.
Alcohol and fertility. So if your liver's not working, if your gut's not working, this is going to affect your fertility.
It's this sort of inflammatory piece.
Yeah.
So we've got the inflammation telling the body that it doesn't want to get pregnant because it's in danger. It's causing a sort of continuous sympathetic dominance in the body, which is a stress state, which, I'm very, very cautious of, because I myself had some adrenal fatigue during COVID. And that's where basically your adrenals sort of can't produce the right amount of cortisol you need to function. And so having that just continuous inflammatory state causes this heightened immune response and a heightened stress response all the time. So that's not the state that a body wants to get pregnant in. And then you combine it with the hormonal imbalance, and it's it is the reason why a lot of women struggle to get pregnant. And actually, things like having acupuncture, which helps to calm the nervous system, is that beautiful solution. But consciously breathing and meditation and, all these processes, hopefully are now becoming more well known as this can make a real difference. You hear of women who've been trying IVF for years and years, and then they give up and they're going, I'm not going to do it. And they just go back to relaxing, and then they get pregnant. And it's just a sign.
Yeah. And then I'm sure like alcohol exacerbates any of that kind of anxiety as well. You think you're having a glass of wine to relax, but actually it's doing the opposite to your body, like it's increasing.
Totally. Yeah, absolutely. It is. It's a depressant. So it causes anxiety and depression all on its own.
Yeah. So for women at this age, what would kind of our advice be around alcohol?
It's all about stepping out of it's having to be slightly different to your friends, as in try and maybe work on some emotional understanding of why is alcohol so important. And is because at this age, you should have that sort of emotional security to know that your friends aren't going to not talk to you if you stop drinking for periods of time. Because the best way to actually get pregnant at this point would be stop drinking, add in a beautifully nutritious diet full of lots of vegetables and fruits, and the fiber from those foods are really helping with detox and allowing for your estrogen to balance, and lots of good proteins. So to really sort of see the process of creating babies as a way as an excuse for changing your life, to changing your lifestyle, to support good health, because and that to be the perfect environment for a baby to be created in, because if we're not eating a good healthy diet, and if we are chronically stressed, whatever, it's going to be hard for that baby, because the baby being in your belly will also receive your stress hormones, receive the nutrition that you're eating. So to really optimize those sort of things, and stepping away from, the need to be in the crowd and drinking and partying. They don't tend to mix very well.
Yeah.
So to optimize that, it is all about starting your healthy journey. You can get away with it up until your 20s. It's when you get into your 20s, mid-30s, that's the really important time.
Yeah. So it's not just about not drinking when you get pregnant. It's about
prior to you do that lead
also
up.
doing it beforehand. And anyone listening, I'll tell you, when you get pregnant, you don't want it anyway.
No,
you don't
exactly.
feel like it.
I know.
It's so funny, like it just switches off. It's really, really strange how you just don't even, or at least I didn't even crave it, didn't want it.
No.
But at all.
Yeah.
I think afterwards as well, like the changes that happen in your body. I had 2 kids, less than 2 years apart. And afterwards, when I came back to start to try and drink again after my second, I struggled. Like it was like the chemical, my body's reaction changed to it. It was like when I had 1 or 2 drinks, I would feel so sick. I'd feel so unwell. I'd be vomiting after 2 drinks.
Yeah.
And like it wasn't I was necessarily inebriated and was really drunk. It was just like my body was expelling it. Like my body didn't want it. I really didn't like how it made me feel. Like I would feel horrific afterwards. It's like I couldn't handle the alcohol, but like I just was having a bad reaction to it.
Yeah.
Is it possible? Is it possible for your body's makeup to change after you've had a child?
There's a massive hormonal shift after you've had children. And also I think you don't realize that how you can build up to, alcohol is quite toxic, and you get, you build up this tolerance. And so before you would have, 2 drinks and you would hardly even feel it. Yeah. But now when you're having it for the first time in 9 months, it's a bit like, oh gosh, what's this? The body, has a kickback. But there could have been a hormonal shift as well where, and I don't know what your reaction was, because, alcohol is quite high in something called histamines, which can, it's fermented and can cause that sort of anxiety and, bloating and that sort of thing. And that's actually what happens a lot in women as they go through perimenopause, is that they become more histamine intolerant. So, but it can happen at any point, because high estrogen with low progesterone, tends to trigger something called histamine intolerance. And of course, you've heard about histamine when it comes to having an allergy. It's like it's sort of causing that sort of reaction in the body. So it could have been related to that.
But yeah, for sure.
Nausea, definitely.
Let's talk about the next stage. And I would actually quite like to break up the next stage between perimenopause and menopause.
Yeah.
If that's okay. So what age do women start to go into perimenopause?
What I tend to ask my clients is, when did your mother go into menopause? When did she finish her periods? Because you can you do tend to mimic what your mother has. So, and it can happen between 7 to 10 years prior to that. Perimenopause starts between 7 to 10 years prior to actual menopause. So perimenopause is that lead up to that one day in the whole of your life, which is menopause. I know that sounds weird. Everybody talks about menopause, but basically menopause is reached when you've had 1 year without periods.
Okay, so it's like dates,
It's
an
one
actual
day.
day.
It's
Right.
one day, and
I
so you're
thought it
either
was
perimenopausal, then you've got your menopause day, and then you're postmenopausal.
Wow. Okay, I'm learning. This
Yeah.
is okay. This is good. I'm learning because this is coming.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes. So
Yeah.
the perimenopause period is where your body is shifting with your sex hormones. Now, interestingly, your sex hormones are not just the hormones that are going to be shifting during that period. And that can be part of the reason why you get some of the adverse symptoms. Because as you go through your perimenopausal phase, as the first sex hormone to drop is your progesterone. So that causes that sort of anxiety. And then that causes this relative estrogen dominance because you're not producing the same amount of progesterone, you're not ovulating as often because actually ovulation causes the progesterone to be triggered. We then get this disparity between your progesterone being low, your estrogen being high. And that then causes sort of these estrogen dominant symptoms, which is, sore boobs and heavy, weird periods that aren't happening at the right time. So the process will happen in a very random way, differing from one person to the next. And that's why it's very hard for anyone to define. But it's also, people will go, I think I'm perimenopausal, but actually it could be another hormone imbalance. Like say, actually somebody with Hashimoto's, they will have thyroid hormone challenges. And thyroid hormone can speed up and be hyperthyroid or slow down and be hypothyroid. And Hashimoto's people tend to have slow thyroid. And that's what most people notice. But what can happen is if it does go hyperthyroid, you get your sort of heart palpitations, hot flushes, those sort of things. So it could be like the first signs of you having Hashimoto's and you're having hypo and hyperthyroid swings. So that's sort of one area. Also, actually, as you go through the sort of perimenopause phase, you become more insulin resistant, which is basically you're not managing the blood sugar in your diet as well. And it's a process that then causes the sort of the weight gain, which is harder because it's not something, you won't change your diet, but actually you become you're just not being able to store the blood sugar. Your insulin will go too high or too low, cause further inflammation. So that's another hormone imbalance. And it's not related to the estrogen and progesterone, which is quite confusing. But the problem with alcohol is that in itself, when you drink during the perimenopause phase, is that it causes higher blood sugar, for one, but it's very high in something called histamines. And when you have very low progesterone and high estrogen, and you're drinking something that's really high in histamines, you're basically causing more estrogen dominant symptoms. So that would be things like trouble sleeping, bloating, anxiety, depression. So histamine on its own, is one factor. Alcohol, interestingly, also produces or gives you a really good burst of something called GABA, which is a really calming, lovely neurotransmitter. And GABA works hand in hand with another neurotransmitter called glutamate, which is this excitatory neurotransmitter. Now, glutamate, as in you've heard of it, MSG, which is a food additive. Now, the thing with GABA is you'll have the wine, you'll drink it, you'll feel a little bit hot flushy, but you'll feel really nice and calm because you've had this lovely burst of GABA. But what happens is in the middle of the night, after you've had that lovely GABA burst, is because they work symbiotically together, you'll get a big kickback of the glutamate. So that leads to that waking up wide awake in the middle of the night. And you get a lot of women who are suffering from these challenges because of this neurotransmitter burst and drop, and then the burst for the glutamate. So watching out for, is that how you're reacting as you're going through perimenopause? Because women, you're at the end of your day, you've been stressed, reach for that glass of wine as that way to relax, but actually it's exacerbating their sleep challenges. And then when you have poor sleep, then that causes this perpetual feeling of not feeling good. So really alcohol is the first thing to remove, to try out, to see whether that makes your hormones feel better.
Oh my gosh. Okay. I've got a lot to look forward to.
But it's not, anyway, I don't think so, I suppose.
Yeah. So first advice obviously would be cut down or stop drinking.
Yeah.
That should help. I want to know some other advice. Like, I'm going to need this. So what else can we do during that kind of perimenopausal phase?
It's watching out for your stress levels. So you want to make sure that you're not in that sort of go, do type, world. As in, if you have a lot of balls to juggle, work out how to juggle them in a much calmer way. Because as we lose our hormones, our estrogen and progesterone, our adrenals, which are lovely cortisol producing glands, they tend to help support with some estrogen and progesterone. They produce something called DHEA, which helps to support your sex hormone production. So if we're chronically stressed, the DHEA is going to drop, and you're not going to be able to have a softer landing. And that's what we're looking for, is a softer, slower landing, rather than this drop from, ovulating, producing your sex hormones regularly each month, and then suddenly they're not producing it anymore, and then you've got no other support in anywhere else in your body. The longer you have your periods for, the better.
And why is that?
It's because it supports your brain health, your neurotransmitter balance, it's basically having a cycle is very supportive.
Okay.
And actually going back to this topic of, teens and having, poor periods and, having really hormonally challenged periods, putting your daughter on the pill is not the solution. Because the problem with the pill is it's just giving different hormones to cause a different hormone dynamic in that person's body, but it's not addressing the root cause. And it's actually, the pill has been found to exacerbate leaky gut, causing gut dysbiosis. It also depletes lots of nutrients, like B6 being a really important one, which is actually really important for detoxification. So the key, I would say, is if your daughter is having, challenges, to try to avoid the pill for as long as possible and work on the sort of healthy lifestyle side of things.
Yeah.
Because it's not good to take long term.
Oh gosh. Yeah, what, that comes back, because I was on Cerazette for 13, 14 years, but didn't have a period for 13, 14 years. It was one of these ones that you take continuously. If ever I'd missed more than 2 or 3 days, then I would have a period, but it was one of these ones that you took all the time. So now you said if that contributes to leaky gut, that probably explains explains a lot.
There's a lot of things that cause leaky gut, though. That's the thing, is our society is quite full of those things.
Yeah, but I'm like, since having children, I've just said no. I'm absolutely not going back on any sort of medical contraception.
No, good.
Done with that.
When you came off it, how did you feel?
I was very, very lucky. I felt good. I was a bit worried that I was going to have some mental instability.
Yeah.
But I came off it a year or so before my wedding. And it wasn't necessarily because of the wedding. We knew we wanted to start a family quite soon after getting married, but it was I just didn't want to be on it anymore. There wasn't one thing that happened. There wasn't a trigger. It was just one day I just woke up and said, okay, I don't want to take this anymore.
Yeah.
Had a discussion with my fiance at the time, husband, and just came off it. And as I came off it, it felt fine. It was fine. Yeah.
And your periods returned
immediately. Yeah. Within Amazing. 3 days. Like, I was very, very lucky with it.
Yeah.
For sure.
Yeah. You'd probably worked on a few root causes during that time anyway. But yeah, it's just watch out for the teens, because they've got enough going on, and then adding in some other hormones. And the difference between like the natural hormones, which you get in HRT, which you can get body identical ones or even bioidentical ones. But if you're adding in a progestin, which is not the natural form of progesterone, that's not doing the same job in the body, so it doesn't work as well. So it can sort of exacerbate sort of those testosterone, the spotty type symptoms.
Okay, oh my gosh, there's so much incredible advice in this in this episode. So going back to kind of the we've talked about perimenopause. What about menopause itself?
Post-menopause, that is a time where basically your estrogen and progesterone are sort of at a very low level. And unfortunately, there's a lot of research now on the fact that actually having very low estrogen levels can be harmful for the brain. So, the brain fog is real. They've done research on perimenopausal brain, the same woman post-menopausal brain, and actually they've seen shrinkage in the brain, actual shrinkage of the brain side, which is a little bit terrifying. But at the same time, that's, and I'm not against HRT at all. I feel that there's a definite time and place. My mother has Alzheimer's, and I've spoken to my doctor, and she says when you are fully postmenopausal, a year after, let's have a think about getting some nice body identical estrogen on board to basically help support, to slow down that brain shrinkage. Yeah. Now, sadly, adding alcohol in at any of these points is just going to cause sort of more inflammation to a certain degree. So, I would say postmenopausal, especially if you are getting symptoms, the alcohol would be the first thing to remove. But adding in things like nice, natural, estrogen promoting foods, like, they're called phytoestrogens, like soy products, maca, ground flaxseed. These are all lovely things that you can add in naturally if you're not feeling fully, like you've been affected by the drop, or you don't have any neurological challenges in your family. But those are quite nice solutions. But postmenopausally, yes, we do need to be very mindful. And that's why the slowing down of the reduction in the hormones. I mean, I've had, when you do blood work to look into whether you're perimenopausal or not, they run LH and FSH, which tells us, where you're at. And my levels for LH and FSH and my estrogen levels have been really rock bottom for a long time, but my vitality is not bad. So I would say it is a question of optimizing the nutrition side of things and really working on stress, which, I'm a bit of an alpha lady who likes to, get things done and whatever, is stepping into that person and saying, is this necessary? Set more boundaries, give yourself that time out. I do acupuncture without fail every week because that for me is my, my treat.
Yeah.
And yoga and swapping out the running for a calming yoga or Pilates or, strength training. Very important when it comes to, perimenopausal and menopausal phase, because we want to build lean muscle mass, because that helps to mop up all that extra blood sugar that might be in the bloodstream because of that predisposition towards the insulin resistance. Yeah. So, really focusing on strength training, less cardio, less stress, nutrition, lots of phytonutrients, lots of colourful vegetables. Fill your plate. Half of your plate should be full of vegetables to add the fibre in to help with your estrogen detox. Yeah.
The colourful vegetables I'm on, but the stress is definitely, I'm a lot less stressed than I was for sure.
Yeah.
And I feel like I can handle a lot more. But you talk about balls, I'm juggling a lot at any one time. Young family, new puppy, podcast, job, business, living away from home, husband, managing the house. There's a lot going on for sure. And my outlet for that is my running.
Yeah.
And a lot of the time it's cardio and it's high intensity workouts. Because I just get such a high afterwards, that, you know, I'm so addicted to starting my day that way now.
I know. And I confess I was a massive runner about 4 years ago during COVID.
Yeah.
And that's when my adrenals crashed.
Yeah.
So you've got to really watch out to make sure you're balancing the hard or the, you know, the running with as much, you know, nurturing as possible. And, you know, I probably pushed, you know, you've got to make sure you're eating enough, because I think a lot of women go through perimenopause and think, I'm going to run a lot, do loads of exercise and not eat anything, and that's how I'm going to lose weight. It doesn't work.
Yeah.
Absolutely doesn't.
And honestly, like, that's something that I'm battling with all the time. And it's, I was a young woman in the noughties where it was, you know, heroin chic, and it was being as skinny as possible. It was like, you know, the 000 thing. And it was just, you know, every single magazine, every single thing. It's just so embedded in there.
Yeah.
And, you know, I eat really healthy, but I definitely don't eat enough.
Yeah.
And I noticed when my last marathon, I gained quite a bit of weight during marathon training.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of that was like my body was just holding on.
Yeah.
I would have these binges as well, but then my body was holding on because it knew I was going to need the energy.
Yeah, definitely. It is. It's a stress on the body, and then the stress causes the body to not want to lose weight.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's definitely I would say stepping back from having to do that and maybe doing some walk running.
Yeah.
So you walk and then you run, and you only do up to a certain sort of heart rate.
Yeah.
And then you allow yourself to come back down again.
Yeah.
I mean, I was you can become quite addicted to the high afterwards, but there's other things you can do where you feel that. I mean, doing some heavy lifting might, you know, give you a bit of that high, but it's also sometimes your body's yearning for what it could be. If you get your body back into balance a bit more, your body won't need that same high boost.
Yeah.
It's that.
100%. We're going to have more conversations about this offline, because I'm like, okay, let's go for sure. We've talked about all the different life stages of a woman, and we've talked about that, look, let's be honest, alcohol isn't great in any life stage. It's not always practical. And if we're being honest, drinking can be really fun. So what practical advice would you give to women who are maybe looking to reduce the alcohol?
My advice to a lot of the ladies who I work with are, you can swap your wine out, especially in that sort of perimenopausal histamine type phase, is for a sort of like a vodka with lime and soda, because the vodka for one and the lime and the soda, it's not going to be something that you'll want to guzzle because it doesn't taste that good, but it will give you that feeling like you're getting, you know, some alcohol. And also you'll have that, you know, group type, you know, if you're out with friends, then you could do that. You know, I drink kombucha, which is homemade, and I love it. And I think that's also, there's so many good alcohol-free alternatives nowadays where you could go up to the bar and get it and nobody else will realize.
Yeah.
I think it's surrounding your brain with the right mindset. So for me, reading This Naked Mind was incredible, because it just made me realize, what am I doing? I have no desire to do this. Because if you have no desire to do something, it's like, you know, if you were told to jump off a bridge, you wouldn't do it because you have no desire to do it. You're not tempted in any way.
Yeah.
And I think that's changing your mindset around to, is this working for me? If it's not, and then removing it by reading, you know, some of the Quit Lit or listening to podcasts.
Yeah.
That's a way to really empower yourself and to feel excited about it.
Yeah. 2 books that changed everything for me. And I think the first was Holly Whitaker's. I think it's The Radical Choice not to drink in a world obsessed with alcohol, something like that. But her book is incredible because it doesn't just talk about the health side, it talks about the politics, it talks about culture. And it was just so eye-opening for me and so impactful. Like it really changed everything. And it became a turning point of like, I don't just want to not drink because it makes me feel a certain way. It opened up 100 other different reasons to why I no longer drink. So that was amazing. And another is Ruby Warrington's Sober Curious. And Sober Curious, it's got a bit of a longer title than that, but that's great as well because she's not at any point saying don't become completely sober. Yeah. But after reading it, when you read it, it's just, for me, I was like, this is me, this everything that she talks about in her book and the way that she talks about the life of being a drinker and then not it is just those two books had a massive impact on me. So I recommend those two for sure.
I think definitely it's the mindset is massive. And I think the realization that you get so much more out of life without it in your world.
Yeah.
And that it's pulling you back and it's actually stopping you from being able to feel whole and,
And it didn't happen right away. I think that's like, it's not like you're going to stop drinking and then within a few days you're going to feel alive and whole and everything's, birds are going to be singing and it's going to be full of joy. Like it doesn't quite happen immediately. It takes a little bit of time.
I remember the early days though, I'd get this buzz thinking about, oh my God, I'm not drinking. And be really excited about it. And then, you'd go out and each social occasion, with different people are different challenges, but you feel so good after each one.
Yeah.
You're like, okay, I've done that out with this group and I thought that it would never be possible.
Yeah.
And then you go to the next one and you're like, oh my gosh.
Especially when you have a good time.
Holiday. Oh, totally.
Sometimes I'm like, oh, I actually really enjoyed myself.
Yeah. Yeah. Going to like big parties where everyone's dancing. I love the atmosphere.
And weddings.
And it's just, it's just, it's, you don't need alcohol to have a good time.
Yeah. And obviously the health benefits, as we've talked about today, are just incredible. So really thank you so much, Jo. I've loved this conversation and I can't wait to talk to you again. And I really do want to do one about gut because it's just something that I've been on a very personal journey with as well. So we'll get into that another time. Thank you so much, Jo. Honestly, it's been such an eye-opening conversation. I value your expertise so much. And thank you for just sharing all of your incredible knowledge and insights with us today.
Well, thank you.
I know our listeners will walk away feeling more empowered to make informed choices about their health. For everyone listening, I hope that you enjoyed this episode. Please hit the subscribe button, leave a review, and it really helps us reach more people and spread the message of intentional living. And don't forget to share this episode with all the amazing women in your life. I am going to link to all of Jo's profiles below so you can reach out to her directly then. So remember, your journey to greater health and well-being starts with one mindful choice at a time. And that doesn't have to be giving up alcohol, but the impact that that's going to have, I promise you, will be unbelievable. So until next time, keep spiraling upwards. I'm not sure if I'm going to do this I'm not sure. I'm trying to use this catchphrase or like, it's new. I'm kind of working on it. I keep going, keep spiraling upwards. It just doesn't come naturally to me, but I'm going to leave this on here. So if anyone's made it to the end of this podcast, what do you think about keep spiraling upwards? Is it working? But thank you very much. And I'll see you soon. Thanks.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.